Okay, so that's why he couldn't fight. And so fighting the embassy, and then obviously didn't have the right artillery. They went to Rong. Rong was the guy who was the Yuan Shikai's boss at the time. Within the Beijing area, his armed forces were the strongest. They had the German Crump cannons, and so they were supposed to point at the British embassy. And as they were pointing at it, the captain Zhang thought, "Do you think it would be a good idea?" So he went back to Rong and asked, "Are we fighting? Are we really going to shoot at going to fire at the British embassy?" And Rong said, "Probably. I personally think the smartest thing that anyone has ever said, at least in the late Qing period." And he said, "When the cannon is fired, they can hear it inside." And so Captain Zhang was very smart. So he just pointed it a bit away and fired into the empty ground right next to the embassy. Now, that's why I said this actually saved China from being partitioned. If the British embassy was annihilated by the Chinese troops at the time, the alliance, they would have to come and they would definitely have to take down the Qing government, and then China would disintegrate a bit sooner than when it eventually did. So you could say that Ronglu actually saved China from being totally colonized by pointing the cannon a little bit further away. And so as the situation comes down in early July, actually the Empress Dowager named Li Hongzhang to be the governor of Zhili and to actually talk about the peace talks. Again, very, very weird. But at the same time, the pro-Boxer troops were actually fighting the alliance soldiers right outside Tianjin, and obviously there is no match. Actually, what's interesting is that actually the artillery, the Chinese were actually not that bad. It's actually pretty good. But then they lost one of the artillery arsenals to the alliance soldiers. So the alliance soldiers actually using Chinese artillery, fighting the Chinese. Exactly the same thing as what happened in the Sino-Japanese War. And then as they went into the Tianjin, some of the Japanese soldiers pretended to be the Boxers, so they went in first. It kind of looked the same. And they went in, and then so Tianjin was gone. And when Tianjin was gone, there was the common looting and killing. And so the original population was about 1 million in Tianjin. When after the killing and everything, and it was talking about how the bodies were actually was just piling up, like that's about the same height as the city was, and that the rivers wouldn't be able to flow because the corpses were actually stuck, and there were about 100,000 left, and then it's like it was like an American a reporter was saying you would see families dying, and then they would be hugging each other as if they're trying to get warmth from each other. So a lot of killing, a lot of looting, so on and so forth, the standard stuff. And then what's interesting is then that the alliance army then created this government. And this comes to be a very, very interesting point in Chinese history. So a lot of the Chinese people, you could say even up to today, like to pee everywhere they want. Okay? And so the Europeans would not have any of that. So the first public lavatory system happened in Tianjin under the foreign occupation. And so if there were any Chinese person that would pee anywhere they want, they would actually be dragged. He'll be fined. He'll also be forced into labor, and the project is building a public lavatory. So when you say is a foreign invasion bad, of course it's bad. But when you say is public lavatory good, of course it's good. And the circumstances under which the public lavatory was built was extremely interesting and ironic. Yeah, and it was also Tianjin was also the first city to have roads, public lamps, street lamps, and so on and so forth, thanks to the foreign invaded armies, right? So once they took Tianjin, actually, as they took Tianjin, the Germans were not part of it because the Germans, they were still very late. They were still coming. They actually didn't leave until the end of July. And when they left Germany, then we actually have the famous Hun speech. I don't know if you know the Hun speech. Actually, Winston Churchill talked about it, about the Germans. And this is the Hun speech made by William II to the German soldiers, at face of the Kettler's murder. And then this is his speech. And then actually, Winston Churchill used it afterwards in the Second World War to talk about Germans. And this goes somewhere like this. It's from William II to his soldiers. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. So it's very, very strong words. And so then they left at the end of July against and fight the Chinese. And as the Empress Dowager was doing all of this, at the end of July, 2 anti-war officials were killed. Xu and Yuan. They were killed. Okay? End of July. What's interesting about Xu is that he was actually ambassador to France and the UK and Germany and the US. And so he was like, you can't just invade other people's embassy. This is totally against any kind of international law. And so he was crying. At the same time, Guangxu was crying. And Guangxu was actually holding his clothes and say, what's going to happen? And Xu was like, we are going to die. And so it's like a very interesting scene where the official and the emperor was just hugging each other and crying. But nonetheless, at the end of July, both of them were murdered. Early August, as the Alliance Army left Tianjin to go against Beijing, early August, the Empress Dowager named Li Hongzhang to be the main representative of the peace talks. Okay, but then Li Hongzhang was still kind of just like taking his time, going from Guangzhou to Shanghai. He had no idea what's going to happen, and all the external communication was gone, right? And at the same time, early August, the Empress Dowager killed 3 more, Li Shan, Lian Yuan, and Xu Yongyi. Killed 3 more anti-Boxer officials. So this is a very convoluted part of history, and then it's still a lot of people are still debating on what was the Empress Dowager thinking, what was going on at all. So because a lot of history books are actually less convoluted than how I make it out today, because the history books tend to at least the Chinese history books would usually go something like this: the Empress Dowager was pro the Boxers, then she lost, and that's why she asked Li Hongzhang to come. So it's easy, right? Okay, so she kind of just repented. But if you look at the dates, the times when she was pro-war, the actions which would show that she was pro-war was simultaneous to when she was against war. Okay, so I think it's up for everybody's own thinking to think why she did that. But in any case, those guys are gone. And by early August, the attack for the alliance coming into Beijing is happening. And then they were supposed to say, let's go at 3 a.m. And so the Japanese went early at 2 a.m., at 2:30. Everybody wanted to be earliest, right? Because that's where the looting happens. At 2:30, and then they marched, and then they continued to march, and then they saw the backs of the American soldiers. And so they asked the American soldiers, hey, you're not supposed to do this. It was supposed to say 3 a.m. Why do you do it? And then the American soldiers don't worry about us. The Russians are in front of us. So everybody just kind of cheated on each other and just went straight to Beijing. And in Beijing, the walls were actually extremely thick. And actually within there, I missed one point. Actually, the Boxers actually wanted to kill the 1 dragon and 2 tigers. The 1 dragon is Guangxu. And the 2 tigers are Prince Qing. We don't worry about him this time. And Li Hongzhang. Li Hongzhang is not in Beijing. It was actually Prince Duan gathering the Boxers wanting to go into the province to kill Guangxu. If it wasn't for Empress Dowager to stop it, Guangxu would be dead. So you see, so it's very interesting. This is really the tension, and I think this is not enough has been written about it, but the tension between Cixi and Duan. Because everybody knows that Cixi hated Guangxu. But then why would, so having him dead is the greatest thing. So why would she stop Duan? The only plausible explanation is that even the Empress Dowager was scared of Duan and his boxers. That's the only, no pun intended, but that's the only reason that you could make sense of it. Okay? And so, but as the soldiers were marching in, then they realized the walls were really thick, so it's very difficult to get in. It was thanks to the Sikhs. They actually realized that they could actually just kind of like Shawshank Redemption, to go through a ditch. And then when they went back up, there was the British embassy. And what's interesting is you look at some of the old pictures, you would see Chinese people helping the Alliance soldiers, their allies, into Beijing because they got paid. Yeah. So like there was actually no conception of you fighting our country or whatever. Like, give me a few bucks, I'll do it for you. Yeah, and so
go beat up some protesters if you give me.
Yeah, you give me some. Yeah. So history always repeats itself, and so as happened in August, they came in, and then what's ironic was that all the everybody in the embassy, when they knew that when they heard like machine gun shots, they knew that the Qing soldiers wouldn't have it. So there must be the allies coming to save them. They all put on the best suits, and they walked in. They saw like a bunch of people who just got out of a ditch. And so actually, even the people who were, even the allied soldiers who said, like it didn't seem like we were there to save them. It's more like we were poorly dressed into a big banquet. So that was one. And then as they went in, obviously looting again. A lot of the Manchurian families, all the main princes and whatever, they would just commit suicide. So especially the women, they would think that being raped by it's same as death, so might as well die first. And so you would go, and then there would basically be beams, and there would just be bodies, kind of like grilled goose that you see in like Chinese restaurants. Just outside, and then just the whole well is like completely packed with people. I think they died of suffocation of people rather than water. So and then obviously the son, so Tongzhi Huangdi, the one before Guangxu, his surviving father-in-law, his family, he left. The father-in-law left. All the women in his household got gang raped in Tiantan. The palace of heavenly peace or whatever, and they all went back and killed themselves. So a lot of it was aristocrats who died. So it's looting again, and they took over the Forbidden City, and so as that happened, the Empress Dowager left the Forbidden City. They ran to the west. Okay, to the west, and Guangxu was like, I can be the representative to negotiate. And the Empress was like, you're coming with me? And so they all left. And then there were only people who could leave, because actually Prince Duan actually kept all the walls shut. So most of the people could not leave. And then as that happened, you can see a lot of pictures in history where a lot of people, if you're Chinese, you're probably a boxer, so you got executed. So Beijing was overtaken by the allies again, and the Empress Dowager and the emperor left. And if you've been to Forbidden City, I don't know if there's a well called Zhenfei Well, Zhen Concubine. Anyway, so she was supposed to, as mentioned last time, she's the only woman that Guangxu loved. As they were leaving, she was put to death by Empress Cixi. She actually ordered a eunuch to throw her into the well. But if you look at pictures, there's no way that she could fit into that well. They built it again. So Zhen. And actually, I've actually a point to this. Why even this lady had to die. So as they left,